Welcome to this episode of Interpersonal Communication in the Workplace. Throughout our course, we've been looking at a lot of interpersonal communication theory, and you've probably asked, where am I going to use theories about listening and talking in the job that I'm working for? This set of interviews allows us to see the practical applications of interpersonal communication. Today, we are looking at interpersonal communication, talking and listening specifically, in small business. We have Carrie Ann with us, who is a local realtor. Carrie Ann, will you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you so much for letting me join you today. I'm very excited. My name is Carrie Ann Chandler. I am a realtor here in Henderson County, North Carolina, but I serve all of Western North Carolina. I also own a small business. It's called Guardian Property Services. We are an HOA management company. That's homeowners associations, but I'm a nice person. And I serve, me and my wife serve 26 communities within Henderson County. So that's the small business, and I help people buy and sell homes here in Western North Carolina.
Great. With 26 communities that you work with and home buyers that you work with, I'm sure you're building relationships all the time, and talking and listening is a part of your job. So I'm curious, as we start off our conversation, what role does conversation have in building relationship with your clients?
So, real estate is a relationship business. Whatever you do, whatever business that you have, you also have to be a lead generator, which means you have people that are going to work with you. Surprisingly, when I took my test, I didn't just get like a bunch of phone calls for folks to buy and sell homes. I had to build relationships with people. So I use those skill sets of active listening, talking, communicating with folks 100% all the time, every day, in both aspects. So for real estate, real estate is really a journey, especially with buyers and with sellers. But I can really even show folks a roadmap of what it looks like, and there are ways that those skills change along that roadmap. But what I will say is, in both businesses, you really have to build relationships, and the best way to build relationships is to actively listen to folks, and make it about that other person.
Yeah, so you're telling me that interpersonal communication actually is the key for you generating business.
100%.
Right.
Yes. People do business with people that they like, know, and trust. And no one's going to trust you if you don't build a relationship with them.
And what motivates you really to communicate with your customers?
So, having clear communication really saves me a bunch of headaches down the road. So I'm going to hone in on real estate for this piece of the conversation. So purchasing a home is very complicated in Western North Carolina. We're a buyer beware state, and there's a ton of intricate kind of pieces, and education is a huge piece of that puzzle. So I want to clearly communicate those steps with my clients and be 100% sure I know what my client is looking for. For folks who are purchasing homes, for me, at least for me, it was the biggest purchase of my lifetime. I will never, well, actually, I have a master's degree, so maybe maybe my student loans. Just kidding. We love education. Okay. But it's the biggest purchase of your lifetime. And so you want to be sure you're getting what you want, right? And so that's where a lot of listening comes into play. But I have to be clear about the process. I have to be clear about the steps, because you stand to lose a lot of money. Even if you don't purchase the home in North Carolina, you can lose a lot of money because we're a buyer beware state. So being clear and upfront, it motivates me so I don't lose my license, so I don't have folks who are upset with me, and so the process goes smoothly and people get into their homes.
You've mentioned this, the process of real estate, specifically in North Carolina, is complex. And for the average person, they may not know a lot about this process. What do you do to make sure that your client is understanding the message that you're sending to them?
Oh, that's such a great question. And it's so important just because there are so many steps. especially, and I come from an education background. That's what my master's degree is in. And so I use a lot of those skill sets and those tools in this process, right? I have with every client what I call a buyer's presentation. This sometimes happens over the phone, sometimes it happens in person. And after that initial buyer's presentation, where we go over what's called a buyer's roadmap. So if I do it over the phone, I might send it to them in an email later. We are still going over each step throughout the process. So I'll just give you a quick example. So after you have found a home you like that you want to buy, and you've gotten under contract, you're going to do inspections. So I might pause at that step and say, okay, friend, client, here we are at this part in the process. Remember, this is what we have done before. This is what's coming, okay? And this is where we are right now. And so I use visualization. I have them say back to me what is happening. And I ask a lot of clarifying questions. So, how are you feeling? Do you understand what's going on right now? Remember, we could lose this pot of money if we don't do this. You know, it's a lot of questions, visualization, and asking clarifying questions.
So in this whole process, you're really using empathy as a job skill, thinking about the other person, where they're at, and being audience centered.
Oh, yes, that you just hit it right there. So, and this is true too if you go back to the very beginning of the process for lead generation. So there's so many great books I could tell folks to read, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, or there's a book called Exactly What to Say that's been really helpful for me. So when you're building friendships, even when you're building friendships, but especially when you're doing lead generation, you want to make it about the other person. So I am the hero in a lot of people's real estate journeys, but it's not my real estate journey. It's about them. It is their movie. It is their storyline. And I'm like the sensei. I'm like the, wise person that comes along to do the guide in the story arc. It's about them. And if you keep it about them and make sure that you're focused on them, you will be successful.
So your role in this is to really help the other person help themselves.
You got it.
So you're communicating to empower your clients. And I think about that with the concept of listening and conversation. In the class, we talk about two different types of questions: closed-ended questions, open-ended questions. So you have to gain enough information about the client, about their needs, about their situation to really help them. How do you use closed-ended and open-ended questions to get the information you need to help them along in the process?
That is such an important thing to consider. So at the very beginning, folks know what they want and also think they know what they want, right? So that's the first piece, is really understanding what type of home, what type of community, what responsibilities does a homeowner want, right? Because that's really a difference between living in a single family home with like 16 acres versus a condo, right? You have two different roles and responsibilities in those places, right? So I ask a lot of open-ended questions like, what are you looking for? That's a big question. That's a really big question. Or even, what do you enjoy? What are some of your hobbies? Those types of things. The other thing I'm doing, I will be honest, a lot of my clients that I work with now are my friends, folks that I've had established relationships with, and I'm really blessed and lucky to have that sphere of people. So I know a lot of personalities, and at the same time, I still get some calls, some random calls, right, from realtor.com or what have you, and I have to build that relationship. It's important to not only know what they're looking for, but how do they best receive information and how do they communicate? Because I'll say to someone, are you okay? Are you feeling overwhelmed? And if I've known them for a long time and they're like, I'm fine. And I'm like, oh, I know that person's freaking out. I might be able to say, okay, let's talk through this just one more time. I just want you to be clear and know what's happening, right? Because the other piece of this puzzle is that there's a little bit of this where folks come in and it's almost like society expects us to know all of these things. I didn't learn how to buy a house in school, and so there's a little bit of fronting or what. Anyway, all that to say, you want to learn what people want, but also how people learn and how do they give and receive information.
So it sounds a lot like we talk about this idea of perception checking, just checking to make sure you understand what the other person is saying. And it sounds like you engage in a lot of that. And in your business, this theory that we talk about in class really is alive and practical with that. I think about this idea of listening to customers, and there are different listening styles that we have. And are there times that require you to listen differently? So for example, there's a people-oriented listening style versus content versus time-oriented. How do you know how to listen to your customer?
You got all the great questions today. Yes, I would say I thought about this too a little bit beforehand, and it really depends on what stage we're at in the process and also who that audience is. So in the very beginning, I'm doing those really large open-ended questions. I'm just kind of in this big information gathering session. And then when we are going and searching and looking at the homes, I'm doing listening that's really along the lines of I'm creating a task list in my head. What are the questions I need to answer? What's my homework from this showing? Who are the contractors I need to engage in? All of those pieces. So I would say it just changes depending on what stage we're at in the process and also who is the audience, right? And I do a lot of reflecting of that back to my client too.
I really appreciate the idea that you keep bringing up that communication is about the audience. You always have to think about the audience, whether it's giving a speech or whether you're working one-on-one with someone in a professional environment. So as we're thinking about this process today, many of us that are in the class are aspiring business owners. Whatever it may be, it's an automotive shop, maybe it's real estate, maybe it's cosmetology. If you were to give advice about communication as a successful business owner, what piece of advice would you give to aspiring business owners?
Stop talking. I don't want to be Hamilton, but talk less, listen more. That was actually Aaron Burr. But honestly and truly, I think that we have, at least today, I don't want to get too meta on us, but we want to fill all of these open spaces a lot of the times. And if we just wait and be patient and allow for a little bit of a gap, folks will tell you how they're feeling. So I would say the best piece of advice is to talk less and listen more, and really imagine yourself as that guiding, and no matter what the business is. So for me, it's real estate. I'm guiding them along that process, but maybe it's automotive, right? And so you really are guiding them along the process of having a successful working car, right? So what does that look like? You're the expert, you have the wisdom, but it is their hero's journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really good advice for those of us that are thinking about being successful in a business, but also any type of workplace environment. Thank you, Carrie Ann, for joining us on this episode of Interpersonal Communication in the Workplace.
It's so fun. Thank you.